But we're talking about is a fusion of the source of Torah mitzvahs with the source of souls. The source of the commandments is a divine level called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The source of souls is a divine level called Shechina. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the masculine energy of God. Shechina is the feminine energy of God. So let's continue. As I said, the Rebbe is going to say like, whoa, are you really that holy to do this? Of course we are. So we are right after the side note on the bottom of page 114. And in the side note, what the Rebbe taught us last week is that besides every Jew in the world benefiting from the Tanya you're studying tonight, because it's not your study, it's everyone's study. Also, spiritually, as we explained at length last week, there's a shifting in the dynamics of God's energies above because of this great thing you're doing. And instead of the normative flow of energies, which is some flows are from God's kindness, from beneficence, from compassion, from judgment, instead it all becomes one energy, and the energy that flows down is the energy of kindness. So not only does every person benefit because of the mitzvah done that now is theirs, it's all of ours, but also we all benefit because of what we're doing. There's a flow only of kindness to the world. What the world is going to get saturated is God's kindness, which definitely is something we all would feel is very beneficial and needed now. And we're able to make it happen by taking our commandment and sacrificing it and giving it up and giving it to the Jews of the world, to every single Jew. Okay, so let's continue reading inside. So we're right after the side note on the bottom of page 114, the beginning of those short little lines. Now, even for this to be really true in your heart, for you to sincerely be feeling this, God, this is not for me, this is for world Jewry. That you so want this supernal unification, meaning, why would I be doing this? Because this is what God wants. Again, God is not asking you to take every single thing you do for him all day long and sacrifice every single thing. No, God's not. But God would like you occasionally to give some of the things you do away to sacrifice and to share them with every single Jew. And when that happens, this allows this unification of God's energies, which is why, as an outcome, the energy that flows down to this world is kindness. God really wants that to happen. We have the ability to do it or not to do it. Well, why wouldn't someone do it? I spaced out. I forgot. I don't feel I can give up any of my commandments. I need them all. They're precious things. If I really feel they're precious, I'm not so willing to give them up. Maybe I don't do as many as I would like to be doing. So whatever I do, I definitely want to keep. If something's really valuable, I definitely want to keep it. If it's not so valuable, what's the point of giving it away anyway? Whatever we tell her. So as the Alter Rebbe is looking at it, you know why? I'm thinking we're doing this now because we really know that Jews of the world need this help. So I think we have high motivation. The Alter Rebbe is saying, this is what God wants. God would like you to do this. God would like you to gift every single Jew with some of your commandments. God would like you to allow his energies to be unified in such a way that what flows into this world is kindness. So the Rebbe said, you might say, but I'm not so holy. I'm not so spiritual that I'm really wanting to do this. To really do this for real, I need an enormous love of God in my heart. Meaning, do I need an enormous love of God in my heart to serve necessarily? You can serve selfishly. Meaning, if you know it's the truth, if you get it, and every one of us intuitively gets it. I believe in God. I believe in the commandments. I believe in reward and punishment. I don't have to be thinking any deep rocket science level thoughts, any deep philosophical thoughts. I don't have to be thinking any selfless thoughts. It could be very pragmatic. There's a God. He's commanding me. He can and will completely give me all the good, and the opposite is true as well. So I go and serve as a self-centered person that wants a good life. Is that all true? It is true. It's absolutely true. You could be completely self-centered and serve God because you want a good life. We say this in Shema. In the second paragraph of Shema, we have 3 paragraphs of Shema, and these are foundational to our faith. And that's the whole message of the second paragraph of Shema. If you serve me, it will work. Your life will be good. You will see God's blessings. If you do not serve me, you'll see the opposite. So Do I necessarily need to have an intense love of God in every fiber of my being to serve? No, I don't. But I think to do this, I need to have that, because this isn't about my benefit. This is the opposite of my benefit, meaning humans are generally wired to be self-centered, egocentric. That's mankind. So the more I do, the more blessings I get. Well, that makes sense to me. And now I'm saying, do. They're not about you. They're not for you. They're for Jewish people in the whole world. And a person could say, well, what do I do? I'm doing. If it's hard for me to do, I definitely want those blessings. I definitely want those benefits. Why would I give them away? That doesn't seem fair, right? Part of my egocentric lifestyle. What am I doing this for? Well, I guess if you really love God, you would do it because you understand God wants it. But does the Alter Rebbe really think I love God that much? Am I really so holy that I'm not thinking about my benefit? Because when you do this, you are sacrificing your benefit. That specific act, whatever it is, like Gittel said, if it's serving God and making supper, or like Sarah said, giving the charity or saying the Amen, if the more we understand how valuable the things are, the more we understand it's a sacrifice. So I must have a lot of love of God to sacrifice. But do I really have that much love of God? So why would I be doing this? Because if I was on that level and I was so conscious of my intense, deep feelings for God, well, that's what I'd be thinking about. I want to give God nachas. I want to give God pleasure. I want to give God what he wants. I would feel grateful that I could give God what he wants. I would feel privileged. I would feel special. I would be happy. There's something I can do that God really wants, and I could do this for him. That's a wonderful feeling. If you really, really are conscious of your love of God. Not to be doing it even spiritually for myself. Meaning there's many levels of selfish service of God. On the simplest level, which works and is true, every good thing we do creates blessings in our life. And the opposite is true as well. So as a human being, I want good in my life and I don't want anything else, and therefore I serve. And that's perfectly legit. It's compared, our sages compare it to like a bartering system, like an ATM machine. Punch certain buttons, then out comes the cash. You go into a candy store and you say, I want that, and that, and that. We go into God's candy store and we say, I want from that bin called health. I want from that bin called sustenance. I want from that bin called children, success for my children. Pull out the candy. And God says, sure, put your currency on the table. I'm going to have to pay for this? Yeah. How do I pay for it? With your good deeds, with your commandments, with your service of God. So you put on the table whatever you have, and God could say, I can't get you all of this. I can give you some of it. You want more? You got to do more. Now you could say, oh my gosh, that is such a shallow, superficial service of God. It works. It's legit. It's allowed. God respects it. God honors it. There is nothing wrong with saying, God, I need more from you. And God says, great, give me more. If I give you more, you'll give me more? Absolutely. 100% honest, accepted, classical service. And you can have much higher than that. That still, in a sense, goes back to self. For example, as the Rebbe is saying here, you could be serving because you want godliness in your life, because you're a spiritual person, and you feel the more you serve, the closer you are to God, and the more there's godliness, the more godliness is nurturing your soul. Is that allowed? That's 100% allowed. Is it true? It's absolutely true. Is it self-centered? It's self-centered. It's a very spiritual self-centered, but it's still about me. And again, that's allowed. And it's very hard for us to really escape the I. Even again, I'm going from one end of the spectrum to the other. From the person that's serving not to get punished, who's serving to get more blessings and rewards, who's serving to have a spiritually close relationship with God. Again, that's very far one from the other, but it's still all along the same spectrum. And then there's a real tzaddik. there's a person who's so holy and who loves God so much that he's not on the spectrum, that it's not about him. It's only about God's needs. As the Rebbe is now going to quote from the Zohar, Ella, but Kivara, this is Aramaic here, it's quoting from the Zohar, like a son, that he's trying, really trying here to free his father, his mother, that he loves his parent more than he loves himself, even more than he loves his spiritual self, etc. As we quoted above in, I believe, chapter 10, when we were discussing the tzaddik, to understand what a tzaddik is from the Raya Mehemna, which is a certain section of Zohar. The Raya Mehemna, which means faithful shepherd, it's a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses. Raya Mehemna says, what's a tzaddik? What's a person of such absolute perfection of spirituality in his service? He's someone that's not doing it for himself. He's not thinking about his gain, not his physical gain, not his spiritual gain. He's not doing more to get more blessings. He's not doing more to take away problems. He's not doing more to cause good stuff in his life. He's not doing more to have more spirituality. He's not doing more to deepen his relationship with God. He's doing because God has a need. In the complete quote, where here it's quoted partially, it's speaking as if the parent is hostage, imprisoned, captive. And the child, with such love for his parent, will sacrifice everything to save his parent. And as the Zohar explains, he'll sacrifice all of his physical and all of his spiritual to save his parent. And as we see with the very, very holy, righteous, pure tzaddikim, so many stories of them doing exactly that, where tzaddik will say, for example, oh, this town does not have a mikvah, a ritual bath. Well, we got to raise money. Oh, nobody wants to give money. There's a poor town. Nobody cares. All right, I'll auction off my portion of the world to come. Your portion of the world to come for a ritual bath in a town you're just traveling through. You don't even live here. You never come here again. Yeah, there's a need. Jews need to have a mikvah. They need to have this ritual bath. My reward? Do I need that? I don't need that. But a ritual bath is needed. Many, many stories similar to this one that I'm saying as a true story, not as something I'm making up. Because it's like reward, physical reward, spiritual reward. That's not what this is about. This is about God's needs. God's needs that his children should have a mikvah. I have a bartering chip. I can sell something, have it to be my own spiritual reward. Great, glad to do it. Or tzaddik hears for whatever reason he's losing his reward, the world to come, and all of his spiritual reward, and tzaddik is great. God, now I can serve you for real. Nothing about this funny business of reward. It's not about reward. It's about you. It's about your needs. That's why I want to do this. So that's the tzaddik, the holy, godly individual that truly is absolutely selfless. But we say to the Alter Rebbe, I don't think that's us. And yet, Alter Rebbe, you are saying in Tanya that you want us to be sort of like that. Obviously not completely like that. Obviously, it's in certain discrete moments when we're choosing to sacrifice an act, like Firma suggested now, that you could say to God, all the benefits that I should get from this night of learning, all the spiritual benefits, I want to give to the Jewish people. A person could say, well, I'm okay. It's only once. Or a person could say, well, how often do I learn? I need all these benefits. So are we really so holy to be able to do this? Like, what's the Alter Rebbe thinking? So the Alter Rebbe continues. That was sort of like the question, our complaint, as we would say, taina, to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe knows what's going on in our head. So he says it, and now he's going to respond. Mikol makom. Nevertheless, yesh l'kol adam lahargil atma b'kavana zu. Even if you don't think you're so holy, even if you don't think you have the spiritual muscles to love God enough to sacrifice like this for him, think it anyway. habituate yourself to this. There's a concept that the Alter Rebbe discussed several times in Tanya. Our sages say, Hergel na'aset teva sheni. Habit will change your nature. If you habituate yourself to be patient, meaning you pretend, and you act patient, and you act patient, and you act patient, it changes you on the inside, and you become a patient person. As you can do this with any trait you would like to acquire. Act it, and act it, and act it, and you actually change on the inside. That's what our sages are saying. It's a very powerful tool. So here the Rebbe is saying the same concept in terms of this spiritual intention. You're not so holy. You're not so selfless. You want the benefits from the good things you're doing. The Alter says, I get that. But habituate yourself to think this thought. Because even if it's not 100% true in your heart, meaning even if inside your heart of hearts, you really would like to benefit from what you're doing, and you might feel a little stressed thinking of giving it away, that really you totally desire to just selflessly give away tonight's learning to help every Jew in the world instead of yourself. Nevertheless, but on a certain level, it is true. You're looking at yourself and you're saying, no way, not me. I'm not so holy. I'm not so selfless. It's not all about God's needs. It's also about my needs. And the Alter says, okay. But there's a part of you that does feel this sincerely. Maybe not entirely. But there's a piece of you that sincerely feels this. How does the Alter Rebbe know this? Because every one of us, de facto, because you are Jewish, you love God. Not that you worked on the love, not that you studied or meditated or contemplated. No, it's just because you're Jewish. And every Jew has a soul, and embedded in that soul is an enormous love of God. And that love makes me want to do what God wants. Because I really love him, I really want to be in sync with him. I really want to be close to him. I really want to give to him. I really want to give him nachas. I really want to fulfill his needs. And this is what he wants. This selflessness, this sacrificing my commandment for all the Jewish people, causing this supernal unification of all of God's energies, he wants this. So I might not totally want it, because there's a piece of me that wants what's good for me, spiritually and physically. But a certain piece of me does want it, because on a certain level, at my core, I love God, and I want to do what he wants. And this he wants. I was saying, what you're accomplishing, as we've explained, by sacrificing your commandment, is causing enormous spiritual gains for God. Is different. It made your commandment more powerful than when it's just your personal commandment. Now it's the Jewish people's commandment. And this is allowing God's energies to unite from the catalyst of your commandment. And God really wants this. And therefore, the Rebbe is saying, so do you. So if you habituate yourself to think it, and you do so, you take certain commandments, and you habituate yourself to say, okay, this I'm going to give to the Jewish people. This I'm going to give to the Jewish people. This I'm going to give to the Jewish people. And I'm giving to the Jewish people because this is what God wants. Well, there's a piece inside of me that really does want to do what God wants, even if I'm not personally benefiting, but God's benefiting. It's what he wants. Well, if it's what he wants, that's what I want to do because I want to do what he wants. In other words, in our brain, it's very intertwined, doing what God wants and our benefit. Because generally the two go hand in hand. Every time you do what God wants, you are personally benefiting. So it becomes like a mush, a cholent inside of you of sincerely wanting to give to God, aka sincerely wanting, needing, and appreciating all the blessings that come into our life when we give to God. Because that's usually how it is. So here the Rebbe is saying you have to like separate those two components of God's needs and your benefit by giving God his needs. Because now we're saying it's not your personal benefit. It's the Jewish people's. It's God. It's not yours. But since inside of me, I really love him, not just for how it's so good for me. I love him. And this is his need. This is his want. This is his desire. By saying it, by focusing on it, I can access that part of myself that truly loves him on this level. Sort of like, in a sense, we could compare it to the idea of positive thought creates a positive reality. As we say in the Yiddish vernacular, tracht gut wird sein gut. When you think positive, it becomes positive. And the question is like, well, why? We can almost envision it as if there's various options of what's going to happen. But by focusing on one, positive one, and thinking about it and saying it and thinking about it and saying it, you're strengthening it. You're pulling it out. You're manifesting it. So your positive thoughts create a positive reality. So similarly here, inside of yourself, you have an absolute love for God, but you don't necessarily have to go to that place in your general service of God all day long, because there's lots of personal benefit we have in serving God. And I hope we all see in our life how much benefit we have in serving God. And you should, and we do. And that's embedded in God's system. But here you want to focus on, but you know what, God? I love you. And there is a piece of me that says I could do it just for you. And when I focus on that piece and think the thought, this is not for me, this is for the Jewish people, this is God's will that this should be for the Jewish people. Each time as I'm thinking that thought and habituating myself to think along those lines, I'm also pulling out that piece of love for God inside of me. So that makes my thought true. It's not fake. It's not hollow. It's not a sham. Because inside of me, I do love God on that level. So when I'm thinking the thought and focusing on it, saying, God, this is for the Jewish people. I know this is what you want. I do love you and want to give you what you want just because it's what you want. Each time as you think that, that piece buried inside of you becomes more and more manifest. It's more and more overt. It becomes stronger and stronger voice inside of you. Now, the Rebbe was explaining, someone just asked a question. Someone asked a question, which is a very good point. She said we could compare it. You have money. Obviously, we all have needs for money. It could be for your necessities or it could be for luxuries. But we still want luxuries. And yet, instead of taking this money and using it for myself, I'm going to give it to help others use. Similarly, I have commandments. That's a very strong spiritual currency, even more powerful, even more valuable in the real world of godliness. So I can similarly, just like we can understand someone taking their money, and so many Jews recently in the past 2 weeks took so much money and just poured it to help the Jews and all the needs, if it's the needs of the soldiers, the needs of the country, the needs of people that were victimized, and need so many needs. Down to someone telling me yesterday how she heard of like a special needs school that had to be transferred. So she bought like lots and lots and lots of Play-Doh and sent it to them. So they have something to do with the children, like down to those needs. So people would take their money and use it for themselves and we have needs. And we could take that same money and just give it to another Jew because they need it. So similarly, yes, we can say it's a very similar parallel thought. I have my commandments. I have all the spiritual currency that I should gain from that commandment. And I could choose the same way to say, but you know what? It's okay. I'm going to give it away. I'm going to give it away to benefit the Jewish people. Now, the Alter Rebbe's point here is it's not just benefiting the Jewish people. It's really benefiting God. And we explained this a bit before, and we explained this a bit last week, and the Rebbe is now going to explain a bit more this idea of how God is benefiting so much when you do this. Because there's a real unification of God's energies that can only happen in this type of situation and don't happen when you just personally having your personal benefit from your personal commandments. The idea is that because through doing this, through taking your commandment, why does God want this so desperately? Well, you say, well, he wants to help the Jewish people. True, but this is also something that God needs. And this is how we set up the system. That's what's helping the Jewish people is something he needs. כי על ידי זה מסייחדים גם כן מקור התורה והמצווה שהוא הקדוש ברוך הוא עם מקור נפש האלוקis הנקרא בשם שכינה שם מבחינת ממלא כל העלמין ובבחינת סובב כל העלמין כמו שכתוב במקום אחר באריכות. Rebbe says, when you do this, what you're in essence doing is shifting the currency of your act from the act to the source of the act. Meaning, normally, I do a commandment, which is an expression of God's will. And that energy from God's will fuses with my soul. Now I'm saying, no, this isn't about my soul. This is about all the Jewish people. So how do I exactly get this commandment to all the Jewish people? So as the Rebbe explained, because instead of going to your soul, it starts to be connected to you. You did it, right? It goes to the source of your soul. Well, the source of your soul happens to be the source of every Jew's soul. Because there's one spiritual energy called Shechina in the highest spiritual world called Atzilus. In the 10th level of that spiritual world, Malchus of Atzilus, there's a dimension called Shechina. And that is the repository of the source of all of our souls. Again, like there has to be a certain logic here. You can't say, well, I did the commandment and I'm just tossing it like a ball in that direction. No. The energy of the commandment is connected to my soul. Well, instead of going to my soul, it's going to go to the source of my soul. Well, the source of my soul is also in the same place as the source of your soul, as the source of every one of your souls, as the source of every one of the 15 million Jews in this world today's souls. So the energy of the commandment doesn't relate to the soul, it relates to the source of the soul. And in the source of the soul is the source of everyone's soul. So the energy of that commandment goes to the source of all of our souls. And from there, it trickles down to the souls in the bodies of every single Jew. The Rebbe says, what you're doing is going to the source. So just as you want this energy not to go to your soul, but to go to the source of your soul, we're really then pulling out of the commandment for soul. So it's the source of the energy of the commandment to the source of the soul that performed that commandment. And there's a unification and fusion of those two dimensions, which are really two dimensions of God. We said the repository of souls is called Shechina. The source of the Torah and the commandments is called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In Aramaic, we say Kudsha Brichu, Aramaic for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this level of God's encompassing energies, the source of all Torah and commandments, fusing with Shechina, or in Aramaic, Shchinte, the source of all the souls of the Jewish people, the 10th level of the highest world, Malchus of Atzilus, which is the within energy of God. So we have, and I know I'm throwing a lot of terms out, which I'm throwing for the benefit of people that know those terms, and if you don't worry. But what we're talking about is a fusion of the source of Torah mitzvahs with the source of souls. The source of the commandments is a divine level called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The source of souls is a divine level called Shechina. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the masculine energy of God. Shechina is the feminine energy of God. The two fuse together when I take my commandment and go to the source of the commandment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the source of my soul, Shekhinah, unifying and becoming. And from that unification, just as if a man and woman are intimate, there's an energy that can be produced. When these two levels of God come together, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the transcendent energy, and Shekhinah, the within energy, and they fuse together, there's a divine product that comes down and benefits every single Jew in the world. Someone asked, what do we have to be thinking about? Do we have to be thinking, I'm doing this for God, or can we thinking, I'm doing this to help all the Jews? You can totally think, I'm doing this to help all the Jews, because that was the Alter Rebbe's initial point. Meaning, when we started this, and the Alter Rebbe spent a lot of ink on this concept, it's a very, very, very significant concept that the Alter Rebbe wants us to take very practically. The Alter Rebbe started with this idea of, we spent this whole chapter talking about your fear of God, your service of God, but it can't just be about you. It has to be also to help all the Jews. So take some of that service, that fear, that relationship, and give it to the Jewish people. And this is what God wants, and this is very beneficial for him. So we could, in a sense, ideally be thinking of both. It is totally legitimate to be thinking, God, I want to help every Jew in the world, and therefore I want to take this commandment and give it to every Jew, which is how I was been thinking about it this past week, because that's obviously what's in our heart very, very, very strongly. All right, we will stop at this point. We are not finished the concept. As you can see, this is the third week on it. It's a very developed concept that the Alter Rebbe really wants us to take seriously, and I feel is such timing, because I'm sure all of us want to give something to God now that's really going to powerfully help every Jew in the world. And this is such an opportunity.